Hello creatives. How are you doing? Let me hope you are all doing well. And this is Munya Scripts from Munya Scripts Lifestyle and Gary Films Production. Today we are going to be basically looking at poetry. Then poetry from scratch. At least we look at the different forms, different types, different what basically poetry is. And remember, this is only at Munya Scripts Lifestyle, okay, whereby this channel was formed to see that we share creative content, how we can benefit from our creative art. And do not forget to subscribe and become part of this channel. You can donate to us through our PayPal account in the description below. You can support us by buying any merchandise from those that you happen to see below. So we have different platforms, that is latestugmusic.com and latestugmusic.online, where you can post your music and set your own price. When people buy it, you earn, and when you can also set your price on it, you take 65% when someone happens to buy of that price you have set. Then that 35% goes to the marketing, paying off people who are basically making sure to say that those platforms are well run. Then we have latestugmusic.xyz, where you post listings that advertise your business. Basically, one is for free and the others are paid for, or use a certain code that I will happen to also list in this video, and you pay what you can afford to pay because we are on promotion. Okay, back to the topic. We are going to be looking at we are going to be looking at poetry from scratch. What is poetry? The different forms or types of poetry. Are you getting it? So if we happen to come back, our first question is, what is poetry? Okay, so poetry is a type of literature that conveys a thought, okay, describes a scene or tells a story in a concentrated lyrical arrangement of words. I repeat, poetry is the type of literature that conveys a thought, describes a scene, or tells a story in a concentrated lyrical arrangement of words. Poems can be structured with rhyming lines and meter. The rhythm and the emphasis of a line based on symbolic beats. The rhythm and the emphasis of a line based on symbolic beats. Poems can also be free form, which follows no formal structure. Okay, so you can decide to write your form. Okay, that is the free form, which follows no formal structure. Okay, the basic building block of a poem is a verse known as a stanza. Okay, the basic building block of a poem is a verse known as a stanza. A stanza is a grouping of lines related to the same thought or topic. Okay, similar to a paragraph in prose. Okay, the basic building block of a poem is a verse known as a stanza. Okay, stanza is a grouping of lines related to the same thought or topic, similar to a paragraph in prose. Okay, a stanza can be subdivided based on the number of lines it contains. For example, a couplet, okay, is a stanza with 2 lines. Okay, a couplet is a stanza with 2 lines. So let us try to note the different terms that we find. We've found a stanza. Now we are seeing couplet. Okay, so these are like the different things that we happen to note as we read around, to see that at least we understand what poems are, whereby we said a stanza is a grouping of lines related to the same thought or topic. Then a couplet is a stanza within 2 lines. Okay? Is a stanza with 2 lines. Okay? On the page, poetry is visibly unique. A narrow column of words with recurring breaks between stanzas. Lines of a poem may be independent or lengthened with extra spacing between words. Okay? The white space that frames a poem is an enthusiastic guide for how a poem is read. Okay, let us repeat that. On the page, poetry is visibly unique. A narrow column of words with recurring breaks between stanzas. Lines of a poem may be indented, okay, or lengthened with extra spacing between words. The white space that frames a poem is an enthusiastic guide for how a poem is read. So that calls for our next question that says, what is meter in poetry? So what is a meter in poetry? So a poem can contain many elements to give it structure. A poem can contain many elements to give it a structure. Rhythm is perhaps the most common of these elements. Countless poetic works from limericks to epic poems to pop lyrics contain rhythms, but equally important is meter, which imposes specific length and emphasis on a given line of poetry. Okay? So these basically their purpose is to impose specific length and emphasis on a given line of poetry. So what is basically a stanza? Okay? In poetry, a stanza, like where is it used? A stanza, because we looked at what a stanza is. So in poetry, a stanza is used to describe the main building block of a poem. Okay? It is a unit of poetry composed of lines that relate to a similar thought or topic, like a paragraph in prose or a verse in a song. Okay? Every stanza in a poem has its own concept and serves a unique purpose. A stanza may be arranged according to rhythmic patterns and meters, the symbolic bits of a line. It can also be a free flowing verse that has no formal structure. Learn more about stanzas in poems. So you can carry out some research and see that you learn a lot more stuff about stanzas. So that calls for our second question. What is a rhythm scheme? So what is a rhythm scheme? So There are many different types of schemes that poets use in their work. Internal rhythms, slant rhythms, eye rhythms, identical rhythms, and more. Okay? One of the most common ways to write a rhyming poem is to use a rhythm scheme composed of shared vowel, sounds, or consonants. So, and you can learn a lot of more stuff about the use of schemes or rhyme schemes, where now for now we've talked about internal rhythms, slant rhythms, eye rhythms, identical rhythms, and more. So that again takes us to another topic that we would briefly look at, that is the 5 types of poetic forms. I mean the 15 types of poetic forms. 15 types of poetic forms. Okay, 5 types of poetic forms. The first one is from sonnets and epics to haikus and villanelles. Learn more about the 15 of the literature's most enduring types of poems. So we have the blank verse. Blank verse is poetry written with a price meter, almost always iambic pentameter that does not rhythm. Okay, that does not rhythm. So I beg your pardon. Blank verse is a poetry written with a precise meter, almost always iambic pentameter. Okay, then second we have the first one is blank verse. Second is rhythmed poetry. It is rhymed. Rhymed poetry. Then the third one is free verse. So we've looked at the first one, that is blank verse. The second one is rhythmed poetry. Then if we try to go into it, in this one, in contrast to blank verse, rhythmed poems rhythm by definition, although their scheme varies. Okay, then the free verse poetry is poetry that lacks a constant. So these are poems that lack a constant rhythm scheme, metric pattern, or musical form. Okay, that is the free verse. You can write it the way you want it to be. Then epics. An epic poem is a lengthy narrative work of poetry. These long poems typically detail extraordinary feats and adventures of characters from a distant past. Okay, that is the epic poetry. Then we have the narrative poetry. The narrative poetry is similar to an epic. Okay, a narrative poem tells a story. Henry Wadsworth long flowers, long fells, the midnight ride of Paul, and many more. Okay, so with the narrative poetry is similar to an epic. A narrative poem tells a story. Okay, so that is the narrative poetry. Then haiku. So with the haiku is a 3-line poetic form originating in Japan. The first line has 5 syllables, the second line has 7 syllables, and the third line again has 5 syllables. Okay, then the pastoral poetry. Okay, these are the different types of poems. So the 7th one, we have the pastoral poetry. Okay, with the pastoral poetry, a pastoral poem is one that concerns the natural world, rural life, and landscape. These poems have preserved from ancient Greece to ancient Rome to the present day. Okay, then sonnet. Okay, sonnet. These are pastoral. It has to be pastoral. Okay, then the sonnet. So with the sonnet, a sonnet is a 14-line poem typically. So a sonnet is a 14-line poem typically concerning the topic of love. Okay, sonnets contain internal rhythms within their 14 lines. The exact rhythm depends on the style of the sonnet. Okay, sonnet is basically love. Then elegies. An elegy is a poem that reflects upon death or loss. Traditionally, it contains themes of announcing loss and reflection. However, it can also explore schemes or redemption and consolations. Okay, then ode. That is ode. Ode, much like an elegy, an ode is a tribute to its subject, although the subject need not to be dead or even silent, as in John Keats' ode on Gracia. Okay, then we have a lime what? A lime leak. So in a lime leak is a 5-line poem that consists of a single stanza, an ABA. Okay, rhythm scheme and woes subject is a short pitch tell or a description. Then we have what we call a lyric poetry. That is lyric poetry. So with lyric poetry refers to the broad category of poetry that concerns feelings and emotions. This distinguishes it from two other poetic categories, that is epic and dramatic. Then we have what we call the ballad and soliloquy. So with the ballad, a ballad is a form of narrative verse that can be either poetic or musical. It typically follows a pattern of rhythmed quatrains. From John Keats to Samuel Taylor Coleridge to Bob Dylan, it represents melodious form of storytelling. Okay, then the soliloquy is a monologue in which a character speaks to him or herself, expressing inner thoughts that an audience may not otherwise know. Soliloquies are not definitionally poems, although they often can be, most famously in the plays of William Shakespeare. Then lastly, we have what we call the villanelle. We have what we call the villanelle. Is a 9-line poem consisting of 5 tacets and a quatrain with high specified internal rhythm scheme. Originally variation on a pastoral, the villan has evolved to describe obsessions and other intense subject matters as exemplified by Dylan Thomas. Okay, what is imagery in poetry? So besides that, let us continue and look at what is So what is imagery? Like imagining in poetry. So in poetry and literature, imagery is the use of figurative language to evoke a sensory experience in the reader. When a poet uses descriptive language well, they play to the reader's senses, providing them with sights, tastes, smells, sounds, internal and external feelings, and even internal emotion. Okay, so what is the difference between blank verse and the free verse poetry? Okay, so what is the difference between the free verse and the blank verse poetry? So what is the difference between the free verse poetry and the blank verse poetry? Free verse poetry has been popular from the 9th century onward and is not bound by rules regarding rhythm or meter. Blank verse poetry came of age in the 16th century and has been famously employed by the likes of William Shakespeare, John Milton, William Wordsworth, and countless others. Unlike free verse, it adheres to strong metrical pattern. Okay, what is mesis in poetry? So, what is mimesis in poetry? Okay. So what is in poetry? So what is mimesis in poetry? So mimesis in poetry. Copying is something writers usually strive to avoid, and yet the literary theory of mesis says that artists copy constantly. As a matter of necessity, does this make their art bad? Centuries of thinkers from Plato and Aristotle onwards have attempted to answer this question by debating the nature of mesis. So at least let us have that for today, and we shall be continuing from there. The songs in the background are by MUCIAN from MUCIAN's Lifestyle and Gary Films production. So if you want to listen to that music, you can visit my profile on Spotify or any streaming platform, and that profile has MUCIAN. So from there you can search for MUCIAN Flora by MUCIAN and Wadaweyo by MUCIAN. So you will have to you'll be getting those songs there and you listen to them. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe and comment to these videos.